Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
We will make America strong again. We will make America wealthy again. We will make America proud again. We will make America safe again. And we will make America great again. Thank you, Arizona. God bless you. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, what do you say to that? I'm just going to speak from the heart here. What we have witnessed was a total eclipse of the facts. Someone who came out on stage and lied directly to the American people and left things out that he said in an attempt to rewrite history, especially when it comes to Charlottesville. He's unhinged. It's embarrassing, and I don't mean for us, the media, because he went after us, but for the country. This is who we elected president of the United States, a man who is so petty that he has to go after people who he deems to be his enemy, like an imaginary friend of a 6-year-old. His speech was without thought. It was without reason. It was devoid of facts. It was devoid of wisdom. There was no gravitas. There was no sanity there. He was like a child blaming a sibling on something else. He did it. I didn't do it. He certainly opened up the race wound from Charlottesville, a man clearly wounded by the rational people who are abandoning him in droves, meaning those business people and the people in Washington now who are questioning his fitness for office and whether he is stable. A man backed into a corner, it seems, by circumstances beyond his control and beyond his understanding. That's the truth. If you watch that speech as an American, you had to be thinking, what in the world is going on? This is the person we elected as a president of the United States? This petty? This small? The person who's supposed to pull the country together? Certainly didn't happen there. Let's break it all down now. CNN political director David Chalian is here, political analyst April Ryan, political commentator Scott Jennings and Bakari Sellers, political contributor Maria Cardona, Republican strategist Rick Wilson. David, what did you think?
Well, I thought that was a president totally unhinged. There's little doubt about that for anyone watching. I do think you get at a point. This is the evidence that backs up Bob Corker questioning his stability for office. This is the evidence as to why Susan Collins, another Republican senator, isn't so sure he may be around to run for re-election in 2020. This is evidence as to why the Republican leader in the United States, and again, I'm only referring to people from his own party in case people think this is a partisan political issue. It's not. Why Mitch McConnell, the leader of his own party, is telling people and associates, as we learned from the New York Times tonight, that he's not sure this presidency is going to sort of fill out the duration of the term, questioning whether or not this presidency is permanently off course. This is the evidence that it is so severely off course, you can't see the course. It's hard to see how he's going to get back on. And the fact that the President of the United States came out tonight, and again, as you said, it's not about attacking us. That's fine. Although we in the press are going to be the last people to take lessons from Donald Trump on truth-telling and facts.
Who has lied over 1,000 times since he's taken office.
Because that's absurd. But the fact that this is one night after he appealed to the country about unity, about coming together, about peace and love. These were the words he used last night at the top of his speech before he got to the Afghanistan section, because he was still trying to do some cleanup on Charlottesville and really tried to talk about the notion of love and peace and unity. And this was nothing but a speech of division tonight. Mm-hmm. He has I think he's sort of thrown up his hands and decided that the job he was actually elected to do is one that he does not at all seem interested in doing.
He was more interested in getting the accolades from the crowd and from winning. He keeps going back to the election. And then, as I said, lying about what he said to the American people regarding Charlottesville, as if there is no videotape, as if these things are not on record, leaving out the many, many sides. And there's so many notes that I took here. After a while, I said, well, I mean, we'd have to be on air in order to fact check him for 10 more hours, which I'm sure other shows CNN will do throughout the evening and throughout the morning here on, on the network. But it was just unbelievable watching. And again, we don't really care in the media. We expected him to go after us. People are wondering, April Ryan, why did we run this? Because we want people to see their president, and they got a good glimpse of him now, someone who is not widening the tent, a bigger tent, but shrinking his tent and shrinking the people who support him among the general public and certainly among those in Washington. What did you think, April?
Don, I was in disbelief, but mostly from the 44, 45, 46 minutes that he spent on Charlottesville. This is his 5th time. Last night, I was at Fort Myer with the president when he spoke to the military servicemen and servicewomen about Afghanistan. And again, at the top, he talked about Charlottesville. But tonight, 44 minutes, this is saying something that this is still weighing on him. This is a huge issue. And you said the word lie. I don't like to use the word lie, but I think back to when President Barack Obama was in the well of the House, and what congressional leader jumped up and said, "You lie." Well, if we say the word lie for this president, he's lying by omission, because he omitted a lot of facts and his details about the layout of how he addressed the nation, what he said and what he did not say. He totally omitted the alt-left issue. He totally omitted that he said, he talked about both sides are at fault. This president has a very different grasp of reality. But it's also interesting that he brought in Dr. Ben Carson to be on that stage. Also the niece of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. Alveda King, he brought her in. She's
Didn't he
there,
call her Bernice,
as part
though, by
of
accident?
The faith.
Because Bernice King is
Dr.
tweeting
Alveda
on,
King.
yeah, Bernice King is tweeting saying, "I'm not there tonight."
Bernice King is the daughter of Dr. King, but this is the niece of Dr. King, Dr. Alveda King, and he couldn't even say the word Graham. He called him Grim. I was like, wow. But and if you're going to have people on the stage, you want to get their names right. That's one thing. And it also comes at a time, I find it interesting. Armstrong Williams just last week in Martha's Vineyard, last Thursday, he denounced the words of this president. Armstrong Williams is very close to Dr. Ben Carson. So there's a lot going on here when it comes to this issue of Charlottesville. This issue of Charlottesville is the albatross around this administration's neck. They cannot divert away from it. It's just very bad. And then he went on, he talked about Twitter, he talked about us, but I'm looking at how deep Charlottesville is, because he kept going on and what he omitted. He's trying to change history, and history, like you said, we have the tapes, we have the transcripts, and it lives in infamy on social media. So people can see for themselves what he said. It's not about fake media. You can check it for yourself, what the president actually said. He is guilty by omission, and if you want to say the word lie, he lied by omission.
He lied tonight. Let's just flat out say it. He lied. And he also painted himself as he lied, yes. He is the president of the United States, right? And the president of the United States,
and he blamed Barack Obama.
Oh, of course he's going to blame Barack. He's got this thing for Barack Obama. He just can't get over it.
He's obsessed with Obama.
He's obsessed with it.
Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama,
Barack Obama
and Loretta
must have
Lynch.
broken up with him. I don't know what happened with him, but he is mad at him. It's like he's mad at him than an ex-wife. But what got me is that he painted himself as a victim, as the president of the United States, who's supposed to take the high road and set the example, when the only victim in Charlottesville was Heather Heyer. Barely a mention of her name. Maybe he mentioned her once, didn't say her name. But she is the victim in all of this. The President of the United States, Mr. President, you are not a victim here at all. Heather Heyer is the victim. The people who you spoke out against are victims.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he's now talking about all of this love. We did not hear the love during the campaign speeches. I did not hear love, this overarching theme of love. I heard more division and rhetoric to divide a nation.
He
now
almost,
he's
did,
talking
he almost
love.
did the same
He
thing tonight
realizes,
when he said that you're safer in here because we got bigger people, we can beat you up better. That was the insinuation. I'm paraphrasing. Rick Wilson, what did you think?
And how did that person get in here? I mean, if it's about love, everyone should be invited. This is not a private event anymore, or is it? That's my.
He's got a thing with crowd sizes as well because he lied about the size of the crowd and the protesters outside. But Scott Jennings, give me your thoughts.
Yeah.
Rick Wilson, I'm sorry. Rick
sure,
Wilson,
look,
sorry, Rick.
Yeah, go ahead, Rick.
No, well, look, Don, listen. I mean, this was a Castro-esque speech in length. It was an astounding chain of lies tied together by lunatic asides by a man who obviously is mentally unstable. I mean, I'm not joking about it or being a smartass. This is a man who is not well. This is a man who is not qualified or mentally or morally fit to be the president of the United States, and tonight was one more proof of it. This is a guy who went back and tried to revise history and tried to elide the fact that he essentially tonight he just happened to forget the many sides part of this. He happened to forget that the actual impact of the speeches he gave wasn't to reprimand or to chastise the alt-right and the Nazis and the anti-Semites and the Klan, but in fact to let them all nudge each other and elbow each other and go, hey, listen, he's still dog whistling. It's cool, guys. Keep up the fight. This is a guy who went out there tonight and behaved in a way, he alternated between being a whiny 6-year-old who's had his Nintendo taken away and between being the cranky old man who's out there condemning everyone who doesn't worship him adequately. It was an astounding moment in our history. And I know the 25th Amendment is a remote possibility, but if people around him don't think that this guy is absolutely bat crap crazy, they are mistaken.
I want to get your response to this first. When I said this is a person who is supposed to unite the country, who's supposed to be bigger than everyone else, who's clearly supposed to humble himself to critics, and if there is a rough time in America, supposed to listen to everyone. This is not bringing people together. He did not, nothing he said tonight brought people together, Scott. And this is an indication if you see what's happening outside. Well, I'm going to respond.
Sure, I'm going to respond to this as a political strategist, and I will tell you, I think the way they see it is tonight's event was a campaign speech. Last night's event was a speech to the nation. Tonight's event was a speech to that core group of people that have kept them afloat since the beginning. I think they're probably looking at some opinion polls right now that show him slipping a little bit in strong approval with Republicans, and they thought this might be a good time to try to go back to what worked for them during the campaign last year. I'm not sure this is what the nation needs right now, but if you were looking at it through the lens of raw political strategy and trying to hold the coalition together that has brought you to the presidency, this is exactly the kind of speech you would give. It took him a while to get there. He finally started ticking through the agenda items that they think is going to keep Republicans together as they move forward. I would also point out one more thing. He's now the president, so he doesn't have an actual named opponent. Last year it was Crooked Hillary. I was struck tonight by him using the crooked nickname on the media. He called it the crooked media. And so they've clearly decided to go all in on turning the media, CNN, whoever, the media, into this year's and next year's Hillary Clinton. So that is the opponent right now for them. There's no leader of the Democratic Party to attack the way there was during the campaign. So they are going to use the crooked media as the embodiment of everything that his coalition of supporters don't like
Scott,
about what might be going on in the country.
You're looking at this through a political lens, but just look at, as I said, as an American. And I would like to have heard something tonight about the 10 soldiers on the ship.
Sure.
But none of that. Instead, he's just, going after settling scores, and not from this is through his no fault but his own. He should understand how Washington, D.C. works. He has a Republican House. He's got a Republican Senate. He is a Republican in the highest office in the land, and he has no major legislative accomplishments. He cannot get one of his signature campaign promises across, and that is the repeal and replacement of Obamacare. That is not the media's fault. That's his fault. That's people in Washington who he cannot work with or he cannot galvanize. And then he talked about the wall. We're going to build a wall. He didn't say, but guess what he left out tonight? that Mexico is going to pay for it. Lies of omissions and blaming people for his own issues. As an American, not as a political strategist, if you're watching this, I understand the strategy behind it. Whether it works or not, we'll see. But this is what we've come to in America? This person as our leader? Come on.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable with a lot of this strategy. I want to give you the best political analysis that I can give you. I'm not, you know, I've struggled with the president over the last couple of weeks and some of the things he's done. I think the biggest news, frankly, that he made tonight is that the Trump administration is prepared to shut down the government over the funding for the wall. I mean, he flatly said that. And so
are you comfortable with that?
You know, I was looking on Twitter. No, I don't like government shutdowns no matter who's in charge. I was looking through my Twitter feed before we went on the air. And a lot of folks were wondering, you know, if I had to write a story about tonight's speech, where would I start? That's exactly where I would start, because obviously he's got to get together with the Republicans in Congress, and he's pushing the possibility of a government shutdown, which, you know, we'll see what how the markets react to that tomorrow. But that, to me, was the news of the night. I don't know what you think. You're in the you're a professional newsman, but to me, that was the news tonight.
Bakari, where would you start? Is it time to start discussing the 25th Amendment?
I mean, we're going to have discussions about the 25th Amendment, no doubt. I think that the president is unfit. I think the president is unhinged. But many of us have known that for 18 months, 19 months, and we're still here now. I don't know where that conversation really gets us, because what we haven't seen along this path, while we're talking about the character and fitness, is elected Republicans show any leadership or fortitude. There were two things tonight that stood out to me about the speech, and probably where I would begin is something that you said. I'll piggyback on a comment you made. The first is, in Charlottesville, there was only one victim. Her name was Heather Heyer. The victim was not Donald Trump. He went on a rampage of minute after minute after minute, just recycling these lines, lying and lying and lying, and not uplifting her spirit, the spirit of protest, the spirit of a quest for justice and freedom and peace and all of those things that embodied the life of Heather Heyer. He was really, really small and really, really petty tonight, but we know him to be that. The second thing that stood out to me was that the President of the United States had more kind words for the leader of North Korea than he did for a war hero senator who is fighting brain cancer. I mean, that literally jumped out at me. The way that he attacked John McCain, who served our country admirably, who's fighting one of the toughest battles of his life in his own home state, was cowardice, it was petty, it was beneath the office. And so I just, what we saw today, I don't know why people expect Donald Trump to stand up when we need someone of some moral character. I don't understand why people expect him to fill some void of leadership. He hasn't shown the ability to do that because he's morally vapid. Yeah. So what do we do now? And I think that what we're starting to see is that the moral consciousness of this country is awakening. But until, I keep going back to this, and I love Rick with all my heart. He's one of the best Twitter followers out there. But until we get some of the same type of courage that Rick has every day and a Mitch McConnell or Paul Ryan, I mean, we could just sit around and talk about this all day. And the direction of our country is not going to change.
Listen, and I've been one to say, Maria, that, you know, it was a pipe dream that Donald Trump is not going anywhere. People are saying impeachment, he's going to be there for 4 years. But he has given oxygen to racists. He hasn't really said anything, denounced the alt-right. He talked about the KKK and whatever. He hasn't really done that. He is clearly trying to ignite a civil war in this country. He has not tamped down race. And I'm just going to say, I mean, if he was on my team in this newsroom and said those things, he would be escorted out of the building by security. Yes. And I have to, my colleague Ana Navarro says something, and I want you to respond to this, because I asked Bakari about the 25th Amendment. And she said the only possible, and this is on Twitter, the only possible defensible explanation for Trump's disgusting, unpresidential, narcissistic behavior would be early onset dementia. Maybe. She's not the only one who's been saying, some people have been saying that for months. I mean, but listen, we don't know if that, but if has he shown that he's fit for office?
No.
Especially in this moment?
Absolutely not, Don. But to Bakari's point, this is something that, frankly, the majority of Americans who did not vote for this man understood just how unfit he was to be the occupant of the Oval Office. Tonight, I think, was historic on a couple of levels. The first one is, yes, I do believe that after tonight, a lot of people are going to be thinking that he's not just completely unfit, that he's just not completely ill-equipped to hold this office, but that he might be psychotically demented and ill, you know, of the mind in order to take this office and in order to continue with this office. In fact, Congresswoman Jackie Speer was on CNN during the 7 o'clock hour talking about the 25th Amendment and whether it's time to invoke that. Now, my question after tonight's speech is, where are Republicans on this? Are they proud of their president tonight? Are they proud that this is the leader of the Republican Party? Speaker Ryan, are you going to stand by this man? Mitch McConnell, are you going to stand by this man who has now insulted you up and down? Tonight, Don, America's enemies are laughing, and America, the country, is weeping. And we need to do something about it.
Scott Jennings, I mean, where do you, if you fact check the speech, this is a person who's divorced from reality. The facts just don't add up. And I mean, we'll play. He said, you know, the media won't show you that I said this. We took his press conference live. we took the whole thing live. To look, they're shutting off the cameras. We're on live. It's either he's divorced from reality, he doesn't care, or he's just a flat-out liar. I mean, Scott, come on, brother. I mean, what is going on? What are Republicans going to do? What do you say as a Republican after this? This is crazy.
Well, I hear what you guys are saying about the speech, and I'll just be honest with you. The speech I saw tonight didn't look altogether that much different to me than the campaign rallies of 2016 that led up to him winning the election, or the campaign rallies of 2015 when he kicked off his campaign. Big difference, Scott. I think he's virtually the same guy he was.
But the United States then. Hold on. I'm going to be more presidential
but you all were
than
talking
any
about tossing
other
a guy out of office who really isn't any different than he was.
No, I get you.
I hear you. He's
I
the
get
president
you.
now.
I get you. And you're right. Why should we be surprised? When someone shows you who they are, believe them. This is who the guy was. But everyone who said, oh, he's just doing that because he wants to win, he has to say that. Everybody does that on the campaign trail. No, this is the same madness from the campaign trail that is now in the Oval Office. And him saying, oh, well, I invented the term, what was it, the term that he invented? Extreme vetting. Do you see how many people who's either had to be fired or let go from the White House? Did he extremely vet those people? If he invented the term, then he should understand what extreme vetting means. He's had so many people who have had to be fired for either lying or possibly doing some sort of nefarious behavior, yet he is the inventor of extreme vetting. Scott, can I please get an honest moment from you? This is lunacy.
Well, I hope you don't think that the moments we have together, Don, are typically dishonest, because I try to come on here and give you my honest strategic opinion. But I would just tell you that, again, I think this speech was not aimed at you. Maria, I love you. This speech was not aimed at you. Rick, certainly this speech was not aimed at you. This speech was aimed at a specific audience. He's the same guy today that he was yesterday, the day before, a year ago. But Scott, he believes that this is how he's going to hold his coalition of supporters together. We'll see if he's right. I don't know if he's right.
Scott,
and yes, Don, you're right. When you're the president, your words take on different meanings. So we'll see if he's right.
Scott, tell us the audience. Please define this audience, Scott, please.
Well, I think the audience is the 81% of Republicans who say in the polling that I've seen in the last couple of weeks that are still with this guy.
So I have a question for you, Scott. I mean, so do you think it's smart strategically, if he is actually trying to shore up his support from Republicans, for him to insult a war hero, John McCain, for him to insult Jeff Flake, for him to insult the whole Republican Senate? That is a great way to get Republican support, right?
That's an interesting strategic question, but let me say this real quick, and then you go. But look, Donald Trump has higher numbers among Republican partisans right now than the Republicans in Congress. Do I think it's smart strategically if you're trying to pass bills? No. Do I think somebody looked at polling and said, well, you have you carry more weight with the Republicans than the Republicans in Congress do right now? Somebody put that in front of him, and they judged politically for him personally it might be better. Do I think it's going to help him pass bills? Heck no. But they may think that they are not aiming just at a legislative agenda.
Mitch McConnell has made some significant statements tonight in that phone call with donors to the Republican Party who are very upset. He said this man may not serve out his term, his first term. Mitch McConnell is coming. Well, that says that speaks volumes.
That New York Times story, guys, that New York Times story was a bookend to this speech, and that story tonight was one of the most devastating things I've seen in a pretty long political career. And the fact of the matter is, the smart political response in the broader sense, as a president, is that you're not just the leader of your party, and you're not just the leader of the faction of your party that fanatically supports you. This is a guy tonight. Every eye in the Senate and the House is on him, wondering, can he pull off another night like last night? They have this, they're grasping at these desperate little straws and saying, maybe he'll stay sane for another 24 hours. And tonight what they saw was a guy who was so wild and so lunatic, and they're thinking, oh, also he has control of nuclear weapons. This is a good thing. Yeah. No, it's not. They're terrified of this guy.
I think that is
let David Chilling in, and then Ben Bakari.
I think Rick is making the point that is actually, Scott, I agree with you. We saw a lot of this on the campaign trail. What I think we saw differently tonight, and where I think it did go off the rails, is that we see how much his negative news coverage is under his skin right now. Oh, yeah. I mean, to spend 20 minutes, he knows. It was so clear watching him. He knows his comments over Charlottesville over the last week and a half now have been problematic.
He spent over 40 minutes on Charlottesville.
He completely knows
he spent over 40 minutes on Charlottesville.
Clean it up today. He was still trying to clean it up. Yes, this time by bashing the media and the coverage, but he understands that that is infecting his presidency. I thought that was very clear tonight.
Go ahead, Bakari.
Yes. Just from a 50,000-foot view, just talking about the speech, what the country needed right now was a presidential moment. What Donald Trump and his staff and whomever his strategists are attempted to give us was a campaign moment. And what they did, I mean, it actually made sense on its face. You put Donald Trump in his arguably best setting, which is a campaign rally with all his supporters in Arizona with the likes of Sheriff Joe Arpaio, probably down the street somewhere in the back room somewhere, and he will flourish. That is the thought process. And you even put Ben Carson on stage with him and the niece of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and then he starts out his first 3.5 minutes talking about love and unity and bringing people together. But the problem with Donald Trump is that Donald Trump has been unhinged since he came onto the political scene. This is nothing new. And as he's going through, and as David brought the light, as he's going through and he's dealing with all of these political hurdles, I mean, when you become president, it doesn't make you someone else. It literally shows who you are.
Bakari.
And so what we're doing is we're seeing someone like Donald Trump who's having so much trouble dealing with the mantle and the weight of the expectation of the presidency.
Okay, I got it. I got to get to a break. I got to get to a break. You know exactly what I have to do. And I have to say, Scott, listen, I'm not trying to beat up on you. I just you're taking the brunt for all the Republicans in Washington and everyone who has questions about Donald Trump. They're looking for Scott Jennings for some answers tonight. Here's our breaking news tonight. President Trump's angry, out of control speech in Phoenix, divisive and unrepentant. Back with me, Scott Jennings, Bakari Sellers, Maria Cardona, and Rick Wilson. And joining us now, CNN political commentator Mike Shields and former Breitbart spokesperson Kurt Bardella. I'm so glad, Kurt and Mike, that you joined the panel. Mike, I just want to get your take on the speech you heard tonight. What did you think?
You know, I tend to agree with what Scott said earlier, that this was a speech to the base, and to be honest with you, it's not the speech that I would have advised the president to give. I think the speech he gave last night was one that I would advise him to give. But and Don, you know, we have these conversations on your show about media coverage. I think a piece of advice that I would give everybody is the president spent a tremendous amount of time tonight criticizing the media, and it's right to push back on that. It's right to hold him accountable. It's right to fact check him. But immediately after that, when the conversation shifts into he's insane and he's unfit for office and he's lost his mind and we're doing psychoanalysis on television of the president, you're doing his work for him. This is almost what he wants to see happen, is that he criticizes the media and the media themselves are unhinged and start calling the president insane. I think that's a huge mistake. I also think it's a mistake not to call the protesters, left-wing protesters that are in Arizona right now fighting the police. I think that's a mistake as well. I think if you could do those things, not call the president insane and just fact-check him, and call the protesters out for who they are, you gain the credibility ground that you need to push back on the president when he gives a speech like this. But you're almost doing his work for him when we start calling him insane. So that's the first comment that I have to make about that.
You thought his speech was sane? You thought it was a rational speech?
I thought that sounded exactly like a speech he gave in the campaign, and no one was calling him, let's have a whole panel discussion about how insane he is during the campaign. And so, you can disagree with what the president's saying. I think that it is correct to criticize the president's handling of how he's communicated to the American people about race and about the Charlottesville incident. That's a legitimate conversation. We should have that, and we have been having that. I think that it's good that he's talking about it. He should keep talking about it. I understand the criticism tonight of how he talked about it, although I do think he was trying to point out that there are parts of what he said that weren't covered, and we can argue about whether or not that's appropriate for him to do or not, but that's a good conversation. He's insane sort of ends our credibility to criticize him, because now people just think that we're the ones that are sort of losing it over his speech, and that's probably what he and a lot of his supporters want us to do.
What people think that, Mike?
Let me respond.
Go ahead, Rick.
Go ahead.
Well, let me jump in here. Mike, your point would be absolutely correct if Donald Trump were a rational actor, and if Donald Trump were anywhere inside the boundary layers of where we deal with a president's behavior. If I just declared Barack Obama insane because I disagree with his politics, it would be off kilter. And it would give him credibility to say, that guy's just a hater. In Donald Trump's case, his behavior is erratic, it is unstable, it is demonstrably, the responsibility, I think, of people who are observing the political process to call this out and not to give him a safe haven to go back and hide in.
You mean his speech or his behavior? Because his behavior are the policies that he's putting forward. His speech is a speech he gave at a rally.
Well, the speech tonight was marked by a whole variety of asides and bizarre assertions and a constant sense of
and that's a legitimate thing that you can criticize his speech and what he said.
And those things reflect, I believe, something much deeper about the president than simply a political set of choices or a strategic set of choices. I believe they reflect a degree to which he is not in touch with reality, and a degree to which he is willing to go out and let his id run around the stage. And I'm sorry, I don't think we're being disrespectful or putting ourselves at risk when we say that this behavior is real and it's demonstrable. We see it every time he goes out on stage, unless he's got a teleprompter and a shock collar on.
Look, I mean, the other part of this, so where this is sort of leading is, and I heard you guys saying this, is that, the Congress has to go do something about this. The American people are who elected the president, okay? The media didn't elect him. Commentators didn't elect him. The Congress didn't elect him either. And so before the Congress is going to go do something like that, this is why we're jumping so far ahead in this conversation, because you're so upset about the speech that he gave, that I just think it does a disservice to say, let's start talking impeachment. I mean, that's like the signs that are and the protesters outside the arena, as opposed to a conversation about, should we fact check the president? Is he handling the Charlottesville thing properly? How should we handle that topic with dignity if we don't think he handled it with dignity?
But it's a long-term.
So, Mike, are you saying that there's never nothing is out of bounds with the president? There was Richard Nixon was driven from office. He resigned. I mean, so the president is always right, is always sane, is always accurate, and can do no wrong?
That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying at all, Don. And that's actually my point. My point is that the media does exist to hold elected officials accountable, and the media has to have credibility with the public when they do that. And we lose our own credibility. I'm saying we because I'm on CNN. We lose our credibility when we go so far as to immediately say, you know what? Let's have a 10-minute conversation with multiple people all chiming in that we just think the president's insane. I mean, did you realize how that's being heard by millions of people? They're going, you know what? The media just blasted the president.
I think you're, hang on. I will let you get in. I think by saying that something is insanity, it's not necessarily saying that what is happening right now is insanity. Not saying specifically that the president is insane. I think people are questioning.
Saying he's insane.
I think people are questioning his fitness for office. And for me to say, oh my God, for people to say, oh my gosh, this is insane, doesn't mean the person is insane. It just means the situation we're in is insane or not the norm. But to question not the former director of national intelligence, also his members of his own party, are questioning his fitness for office. And we are talking about that. And if you cannot assess someone's behavior and figure out whether they're okay or fit for something, then who are we? What have we become? Where we have to have this fake objectivity and pretend that something is not happening. When I hear someone yelling on the street, Mike, for no reason, screaming, howling at the moon in the sky, am I supposed to say, well, I'm going to lose my credibility because I don't assess that person as someone who has something wrong with them or who needs help? We cannot sit here and pretend that that is not happening, that what happened on this stage tonight in Phoenix, Arizona is normal, is rational, is worthy of the highest office in the land, is worthy of someone who has the nuclear codes. For someone to sit there and have these and present these fake enemies, we're not the enemy of the state, of the people, or of the President of the United States. This man has the nuclear codes and can blast us to smithereens at any moment if he wants to. So says the former director of national intelligence, who just appeared on CNN, who said now he is worried and scared about this person.
Yeah, and look, I just think there's a difference between what you just said. First of all, I'm not asking for fake objectivity. I'm asking for a little bit of sort of credibility about how we're talking about these things. Secondly, whether or not he's worthy to hold office and whether or not he's fit and insane to hold office. Worthy to hold office is a partisan thing that lots of Democrats never thought he was and never will ever accept that he is. He's not fit for office. Veers us into a place where it allows people that want to criticize the media, when you want to push back on them and say, you know, the president shouldn't criticize us and that's crazy for him to do that. When we turn and say, well, you know what, he's actually insane, you're doing the work of the president and the people that want to criticize the media. That's my point. I think we can have a conversation about this.
But Mike, members of your own party are saying that they believe that this president has not demonstrated the stability to hold this office. So it's not just a partisan thing. And I would agree with you, except for two things. The audience with which you're saying we're losing credibility are Trump's core supporters, which we never had credibility to begin with. And the second thing is, one more thing, Mike. If you were right, then his approval ratings, both nationally and in key states that he won in November, would not be plummeting. They are plummeting. This president is in crisis, and his actions and his words are a reason for that.
But can we just be relatively blunt? If the president of the United States comes out and misquotes himself intentionally to take pressure off of what we all know to be an inartful, insensitive, and lack of cultured statement after Charlottesville, then I call that a lie. If the president has made omissions and lies repeatedly, therefore I call him a liar. I don't think anything's wrong with that. And then if you think someone's lying intentionally to you repeatedly and does it time after time after time after time again, knowing that we can roll back the tape, then I think it's also fair to say that that exhibits examples of being pathological. So I don't think that there's anything wrong with those criticisms. I don't think that those are out of bounds or out of line. I mean, but I do think that we have to call it as we see it. And listen, I think I've said this for the past, and I agree with you on this point, Mike. There's been absolutely nothing new about Donald Trump today than it was Donald Trump 18 months ago. I mean, I thought he was unfit then. I think he's unfit now. You call me partisan, you call me a hack, you call me whatever you want to call, but I do believe that it's the same person, and I do believe that he still maintains those same characteristics. However, my question to you and any other Republican who wants to say that we're out of bounds in questioning his fitness and character to serve as President of the United States, on what realm of the sanity bar or meter is it okay or is it placed for you to criticize a United States Senator who is a war hero who has brain cancer in his home state? Like, how does anybody think that that is sane? How does anybody think that that displays anything other than being unfit? Normal people do not do things like that. And I think it's fair for Don or myself or Maria or Rick or you or anyone else to call that out for what it is, because to me, that just ain't normal. I'm trying to figure out, why is that the new normalcy?
Okay, a break, and Kurt Bardella will hear from you on the other side. We'll respond on the other side. Scott and Kurt will hear from you. Hey, listen, this is live pictures from Phoenix, Arizona, and you can see that the protesters are still out there. They're battling with police following the president's rant this evening in Phoenix, Arizona. We'll continue to dissect the speech and discuss it and talk about the questions over this president's fitness for office. We'll be right back.
Again, with that fiery campaign rally Joe was just talking about in Phoenix. That was in Arizona last night before thousands of supporters, where President Trump spoke for over an hour on a number of issues. He threatened a government shutdown over border wall funding, for one.
And we are building a wall on the southern border, which is absolutely necessary. Now, the obstructionist Democrats would like us not to do it, but believe me, if we have to close down our government, we're building that wall.
The president hinted that he might pardon controversial Sheriff Joe Arpaio.
Was Sheriff Joe convicted for doing his job? That's what. He should have had a jury, but you know what? I'll make a prediction. I think he's going to be just fine, okay? But I won't do it tonight because I don't want to cause any controversy. Is that okay? But Sheriff Joe can feel good.
Sheriff Joe held in criminal contempt for illegally holding undocumented immigrants to this country. It was the media, though, and its coverage of Charlottesville that consumed about the first half of the rally, really. The president defended his initial response to last week's violence and claimed the media mischaracterized the statements he made following the deadly protest.
What happened in Charlottesville strikes at the core of America. And tonight, this entire arena stands united in forceful condemnation of the thugs who perpetrate hatred and violence. But the very dishonest media, those people right up there with all the cameras, they don't report the facts. Just like they don't want to report that I spoke out forcefully against hatred, bigotry, and violence, and strongly condemned the neo-Nazis, the white supremacists, and the KKK. I said everything. I hit them with neo-Nazi. I hit them with everything. I got the white supremacists, the neo-Nazi, I got them all in there. Let's see. Yeah, KKK, we have KKK. I got them all. So they're having a hard time. So what did they say, right? It should have been sooner. He's a racist.
So that's about where the president went off script. He read almost verbatim some of his remarks on Charlottesville off a piece of paper in his pocket, but he left out the controversial claim that, quote, both sides were to blame for the violence there. Here's what the president said the Saturday after the Charlottesville protest, followed by what he said last night.
We're closely following the terrible events unfolding in Charlottesville, Virginia. We condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides. On many sides. So here's what I said, really fast. Here's what I said on Saturday. We're closely following the terrible events unfolding in Charlottesville, Virginia. This is me speaking. We condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence. That's me speaking on Saturday, right after the event.
He, of course, Mark Halpern, neglected the equivocation where he talked about many sides. But I think we're digging in. You know, we can dig in and find all the lies, find all of his Stalinist anti-press statements. We can dig through that. He's done it before. He will do it again. But for the purposes of what really seems to be the big news coming out of this is a president who's claims he's going to shut down the government, if he can't build his wall. And yesterday evening, the New York Times broke with a story about how Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump are basically in a blood feud. They're screaming at each other on the phone, and Donald Trump constantly insulting him. Donald Trump not only going after Jeff Flake and insulting him in his home state, but insulting an American hero, a war hero, who is battling brain cancer right now, and actually shows absolutely no compassion, no humanity. That may not matter to some of the people that were in the audience last night. It matters to John McCain's colleagues. It matters to Mitch McConnell. And it matters if Donald Trump ever wants to pass legislation through the Senate. And not just about McCain, but about McCain, about Flake, about Mitch McConnell. This guy, I don't see how this moved the ball anywhere but backwards for the president and his hopes to get anything done in Congress this fall.
Welcome to the heightened discipline and new direction of the John Kelly era. You know, the chief of staff was there, and that event, I think, exceeded the low expectations we talked about on the program yesterday about what he was likely to do, put in a state that brings out his worst instincts. If you take what he did last night and how that's going to be received in Washington and by the media, and if you take the New York Times story about Mitch McConnell, last night was a pretty bad moment. If Donald Trump's goal is to get things done, his anger at the media is partly based on knowing that the base loves it, and it's partly based on concern about both the Russia investigation and his inability to bend Congress to his will. And nothing he did last night that I see, even as a bank shot, makes it more likely that the very difficult legislative problems he faces in just a couple weeks are going to be easier to deal with.
Willie Geist, the lack of discipline is just simply extraordinary. You just have to stop and think. And this is going to sound personal. I don't mean it to be personal, but our children have more discipline than this man has. I've never met anybody in politics. I've never met anybody in business. I've never met anybody in athletics that more often did things that hurt themselves just because there was something just on the tip of their tongue or on the top of their head. And last night, again, we soared through, and yes, we can be shocked and stunned and deeply saddened. But the bottom line of this is he's going to continue getting nothing done because of this extraordinary narrowcasting. He is playing to 1/3 of the electorate and driving 2/3 of the electorate away.
Except, Nick, he was trying to win a majority of votes in one state. Now he needs the very people he's deriding. He needs John McCain, he needs Jeff Flake, he needs Dean Heller, he needs Mitch McConnell to get his agenda through. He's president now, he's not a candidate.
Well, he is president, and he's not running a reality show. And so the audience is one thing, but there are other people on set. There are other people whose powers and roles matter in government. And if you can't build consensus, you can't do anything. Look, I was watching this speech, and it reminds me of a guy in a bar complaining about his ex-wife. He's so mad at the media, it's like he feels jilted.
Yeah.
And the problem is that press coverage is his only prism for viewing his own presidency. This guy spends too much time watching TV and reacting to what the media is saying or not saying. There are other tools in the toolbox for presidents that he does not use.
Joe?
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. Gene Robinson, he is so obsessed with the media. He is so, he's more obsessed with the media than the media's obsessed with himself. And this is a guy who's using, Stalinist, terms, calling the media enemy of the people. Last night saying the media didn't love their country. This is a guy that sucked up to the New York press corps, to tabloids, New York Times reporters for over 4 decades. He shamelessly sucked up at all times, and played the New York print media so much that he'd even have women, what was it, New York Post said best sex ever or something like that. He was obsessed with it, and he played them nonstop and wallowed and would lick their feet if that's what it was required to get a good headline. Now suddenly he doesn't like the media. It's his only prism. Listen, Gene, you can talk about that. You can talk about how horrific this speech was last night for this country, for Washington, for the state of politics. Or if you want to, we can just talk about the impact of it, which is you take that speech and the Mitch McConnell story in the Times this morning. This is a guy that's just not going to get anything done.
Yeah, the thing about the speech last night was how sad and predictable it was. Because what did we expect? And boy, we got it. You know, everyone expected that it would be an unhinged Donald Trump performance. Maybe it was a bit heavier on media or enemy of the people than I might have thought. I didn't know he'd spend so much time on that. It was deeply disturbing and offensive the way he spoke of the media, but what Donald Trump's speech is not deeply disturbing and offensive. He's feuding with Mitch McConnell. He grossly insulted both senators, Republican senators from Arizona. If anything, of course, he made it more difficult for him to get anything done than easier. And this is what we face. We face a presidency that is totally dysfunctional, and a president who no longer seems interested in getting his agenda passed. Because if he were, he would be listening to reasonable people in his administration who tell him not to do stuff like this. But he continues. He either can't help himself, or he has decided that for whatever reason, that his strategy is to continue driving a wedge between his 1/3 of the population and the rest of the country, and that's not a winning strategy.
Right. You know, and Mark Halperin, so Gene Robinson, I think really at the end of this block, hit what struck me the most about this speech and struck me the most about where Donald Trump is right now. He's not interested. He can't be interested in getting things done, because anybody who was logically interested in getting things done would have flown to Arizona yesterday and gone and visited John McCain. And let's just be cynical. That's one vote that he needs. Would have talked to Jeff Flake. Hey, let's put it behind us. How can we work together? That's another vote he's going to need for a lot of things. Would have called Mitch McConnell. Again, I mean, this is not about weakness. This is about getting things done. This is doing what Abraham Lincoln did. Talking to a giant in the United States Senate over the past 30 years, who said Abraham Lincoln would do whatever it took to get things done. LBJ would do whatever it took. They would go and they would work people. Ronald Reagan, there's a story of Ronald Reagan early in the administration, somebody knocking his famed jelly beans on the floor, and Reagan, the 69-year-old incumbent new president, getting down on his hands and knees and picking up the jelly beans for the congressman, putting them back up, continuing talking every second. Like, what if we're just at a point where he doesn't care if he gets anything done? He's just going to divide the country as much as he can, because everything he's doing is actually obstructing his own path forward to tax reform, to regulatory reform, to health care reform, to building the wall, to doing all the things he wants to do.
The New York Times story about McConnell and the president is really one of the most important inside game stories of the entire Trump administration, because it reflects Mitch McConnell's thinking about being at the end of his rope and not being the least bit invested in the success of Donald Trump anymore. That is a turning point for Capitol Hill and the Republican Party, and the president last night reflects it. He might feel good about that. He always feels good walking into a big arena of cheering people, but he leaves Arizona today in a worse position than he went in. And again, that's not why presidents go on the road. You don't go on the road to make things worse. Right. You go on the road to try to make things better. And he's now made things worse. And there's no one in Washington today in the Republican Party, I bet you, who reads that New York Times party and thinks, how dare Mitch McConnell do that? Or, well, now Mitch McConnell's going to pay a price. Because the president's not in a position to punish or discipline or get at Mitch McConnell, because Mitch McConnell has a lot of power and the president's power is receded.
Well, you know, Willie, there were a lot of people last night that were trying to analyze Donald Trump's mental health. We won't do that this morning. I won't do that this morning. But I can say he's disconnected, at least from political reality. When he gives the press conference he gave on Tuesday, and the business community, the political community, everybody was shocked and offended by what he did. And Donald Trump was actually, people inside said he was actually very energized by it, was happy all night by his performance. It's the same thing last night. What he did last night made him feel good. And he got on the plane. I'm sure he flew home feeling like, man, I really stuck it to him. But he's disconnected from political reality. He just hurt himself even more with the Republican Party, with the Senate, with the House, with everybody he needs to pass legislation and move this country forward.
Well, he claims to be worried about not getting anything done, but you watch a performance like that last night and you wonder if he even cares about getting anything done. I think to him last night, he put on a show. He aired his grievances. He heard the cheers of the crowd. He got some chants going. He settled scores. He talked about how he watched Good Morning America and saw George Stephanopoulos with Nikki Haley. I mean, he's watching every show. He claims he's not. He's watching the shows, and he's analyzing how he's being covered through the media. And that appears to be the only thing that matters to him. And when he hears a big crowd like that last night, he thinks he had a good night.